I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the documentary feature Folktales with filmmakers Heidi Ewing and Rachel Grady. And in talking a little bit about how this project came about, Heidi, I know that you were listening to a podcast at one point from an American dog sledder and then dove into reading her book, which mentioned having gone to a Nordic folk school. And I was interested in how once you started looking at that, you started to really see the concept together of how this could potentially be a feature documentary together.
Well, as observational filmmakers, we're always looking for stories where something might happen during the course of production. Someone might learn something, change. And so it's a very, very specific, way we look at new stories. We don't do historical films. So it just seemed like a rich subject matter. Like, who would choose to spend a year north of the Arctic Circle? Why would this person go? How might they change at this very tender age of 18 or 19 years old? So it just seemed rich with possibility and cinema. So we're always looking for things that are highly visual. If something takes place in a courtroom, we probably won't make that film. We're always looking to expand our cinematic horizons, and we'd never been to the Arctic. So it seemed to have all the makings, in theory, of possibly a beautiful story with a narrative arc and also with sort of a contained time frame, one school year. So it really intrigued us. We made our first film, The Boys of Baraka, was made over the course of 1 year at a school in Africa. So in a way, for us, 20 years later, it's kind of a return to form and a return to a theme of growing up and how hard it can be, and just how we can all identify with this age group.
And then how did the two of you end up honing in on this particular school? Because I know that you reached out to a bunch of them, and it sounds like meeting the teachers was really crucial into realizing that this was the perfect fit for your story.
hmm Well, like you said, we went to a bunch of them, and these folk schools are all over Scandinavia, and they all kind of have their own focus. And a handful of them do different dog programs. And Heidi and I are both dog lovers and dog owners, and or dog parents, let me say, rather than owners. Um, so we went to Posvik, and it was the hardest one to get to. It takes from New York City 2 days to get to. So I was hoping against hope that it wasn't good. But then we got there, and it was a very special place. It doesn't look like the rest of Norway. It's very sort of untouched, scrubby, flat. It just looks different than Norway. So that was a surprise. We got off the plane. I'm like, where are we? And then we met the dogs, and the dogs were lovable and had different personalities, and were just so different from our dogs. They're enormous and strong. We both have little ones. And then we met the teachers, and the teachers were just like, told us stories about their teaching method and different scenarios with their students. And, some of them brought us to tears, just in terms of, all people need, really. People need a lot of things. But one thing that can totally change your destiny is an incredible teacher. So that was a total plus. So for us, it was coming of age plus the Arctic plus the teachers plus dogs. So we figured with all of that, we were going to have something special.
Right, because I've heard that when you had to kind of dive into financing and developing for the film, obviously because the students sign up fairly close to the program, you didn't yet know who your subjects were going to be at that point. And what was it about the teachers and the dogs in the program that made you feel so solidified in, regardless of who the students end up being and who we follow in that space, like we know that there's something here.
Yeah, I mean, we never met anyone like them. I mean, Iselin, the woman teacher, is angelic, and we call her a Norn, which is the name of the Norwegian fates. She can do anything. She never tires. She knits her own dresses. Tor Atle is like something, out of an adventure story. And they just, as a team, she was a student, which is not in the film, former student. And they just, as a pair, were so unexpected and surprising. I don't think I would have imagined either of them, or definitely not her, when imagining dog sledding teachers. I wouldn't have known where to even think. So the surprise is always good as a filmmaker. we want to be surprised. And we also want to go on some kind of journey. And we want to go on it should feel like a discovery for the audience. And unless the filmmakers are undergoing surprises and making discoveries, I don't think that it gets translated to the audience. I think when we go on a journey, the audience goes on a journey. That's at least that's how we look at it, which is why we never make films about things we have extremely strong opinions on already. Like we're kind of like, this is interesting. I'm curious about this. Where will this take us? And we hope that the audience will come along with us. And that's absolutely what happened in this film, starting with the teachers, and then the students arrived and we met them and they were surprising. And, like, for example, a couple of the students that are main characters are on the introverted side. You don't see a lot of introverts in documentary films. That's because they choose not to participate in documentary films. So like usually you all see the extroverts and the talkers. So in this case, just culturally, it was very, very different. This is a more subtle group of people. And so we thought, oh, this is an interesting thing we've never tried to do. Where will these ideas, where will these personalities take us? So again, we were surprised and challenged, and we hope an audience will be too.
And I think that's such a great point about the fact that we see the more introverted side. We see some of the social anxieties with some of these students, and, they're very open about this at the same time on camera and, kind of talking about it with each other. And I thought that was so interesting to see as a conversation that you don't usually get to see, particularly in documentary films. How did you know when you were first talking to them that, yes, they were a little bit shy, but that they would still be open and forthcoming and willing to share this experience with you?
Well, they all told us immediately what they were feeling. So we didn't have to tease it out. And I think that jumped right out at us that Hege and Bjorn Tor and Roman, the first time we spoke to them, first time we filmed them, they each articulated what they were hoping to get out of it. And I don't think they were doing that on purpose. I think that no one had asked them these particular set of questions and they had an answer and they told us. I do think that's an interesting thing, which is this generation, let's just say 20-year-olds, to be more specific. They have more social anxiety perhaps than other generations. It's getting kind of exacerbated, but they also have language for it more than other generations. So they know what it is. They know how to call it, So that was super interesting. But the people that we focused on were just called it out and helped us figure out like, okay, you just told me, what is your conflict? Let's see how you deal with it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to see Hege, who's the young female student, talking about things like, I think to be a young woman in the world is chaos, and her feelings and her thoughts about that. And it really struck me as a completely different way to see Gen Z than we've seen in any other space on screen. And usually it's everybody trying to figure out how do we tap into their language and communicate with them. But this is them telling us kind of how they feel. Did you set out with that idea of exploring Gen Z through a completely different lens, or was it just a byproduct of wanting to tell the story about the school?
Oh, well, we no, we're interested in the generation for sure. The school was a vehicle by which we could explore and make a film revolving around the generation because we hadn't done that, and are both very curious about what their thoughts and ideas. We have a lot to say about them, but how often do they speak for themselves? And these students were people that don't want to be influencers and don't want to be famous and we really had nothing to offer them except the maybe experience of participating and telling their story. And so there's something pure about it because they weren't looking for us and we showed up, and turned out they had a well of emotions to share and a lot of things to say. And like Rachel said, they had not been asked some of the questions and they were ready with answers. And so yeah, it was a real privilege, actually. I mean, it had its challenges because, you know, Gen Z, 20-year-olds right now, are used to controlling their own image, even if they're not big social media users. So to trust us to chronicle their experience for a year was uncomfortable for them to agree to. And it was really a long trust building exercise. But the result was a great deal of intimacy that I think penetrates the lens and into the people watching.
It does, and the way that you filmed this is so fascinating because it's not a case of, sitting down and having lengthy on-camera interviews with them, and it really feels like you've used a lot of like long lenses to kind of not even be present because so much of this program is about independence and autonomy, and it would completely change the experience of the program if there's someone standing right next to them with a camera. So how did you figure out the placement, the lenses, and just the logistics of all of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, every project has its own set of demands. Um, you know, um, there is in other films, for instance, in our film One of Us, which was about Hasidic Jews, we couldn't film them. So we filmed the whole thing in reflections. So films sort of let you know how to navigate their particular story. So as you said, this is a conundrum, which is our subjects are supposed to be alone and learning how to be alone. So how can we be there? So we had a wonderful crew that was totally up and game for this crazy adventure. And we experimented with different lenses, with different sound setups. They didn't want to be mic'd. So our sound guy was like a ninja, dropping a microphone and then retreating into darkness and filming the dogs on a dog sled was, took a host of tries. Um, that was one big experiment, and we ended up using 4 different kinds of cameras, and so we learned so much. We learned so much about how to film people alone in the wilderness, and it's very specific. And there was a lot of trial and error, but it was really fun to figure it out, and it felt just like them when you kind of crack a case. It feels very satisfying.
We
It,
leaned really heavily on a 70 to 200 millimeter, which we usually lean on anyway. But then we brought into our arsenal a 1200 millimeter with an extender, which we'd never done before. And actually was amazing in low light because, there's 2 months of total darkness when the only light was coming from headlamps. And so the sound, luckily the snow was a bounce board. Luckily there's like lighter long lenses now that did not exist, even 20 years ago. So we were able to actually shoot a verite on very, very, very long lenses. We used a lot of tripods and sticks and easy rigs and things like that. There wasn't a lot of running and gunning in that sense, in order to stabilize. But the film kind of required also, the subject matter required a more quiet take, like not a lot of motion. And so it kind of all wove together to sort of create the tone of the film.
It sounds like there was a lot of troubleshooting when it came to figuring out how to film the students when they were dog sledding, because again, that's something that they want to really be able to experience by themselves. And, I heard that a lot of the cameras that you tried on the dogs for like a dog POV kept falling off, and, that usually you prefer not to use drones, but it felt really necessary for that. And so how did you try a lot of different things and even just a lot of different camera types to figure out how to do that?
Well, every time we did a shoot, we had a meeting on Zoom first. And it was like, how are we going to do this? Are there snowmobile tracks allowed? Is there a cart? How many people can fit on it? Like, should we use the gimbal? Where's the FX30? Oh, it's lighter. Who's going to do what? It was like a whole, like, meeting and like organizational chart of like, and then of course nothing worked out the way it was supposed to. And like one of my DPs started calling it trial and failure because most things didn't work. And it was getting frustrating for our director of photography because these harnesses we bought fell off. And it was very funny. Like some of the footage is like all upside down. You see like a paw and snow in your face, and that's cute for one shot, but like that was the only shot we got. So you had to just laugh about it and be like, oh, how do we crack it? So it was luckily we have a Norwegian crew that had shot a lot in the winter, but they hadn't shot dog sledding. So they were kind of like, we should know how to do this. So it was, yeah, we tried every single thing. We did lean on drones at times, which kept falling out of the sky. Like everything broke, but it worked out in the end. We had enough chances. We had enough opportunities, and every single decent dog sledding shot is in the movie. There's like nothing on the cutting room floor, and like it's really rare to say that for a verite. There's just nothing left. But I'm really proud of our team. These wonderful fellas from Norway, who like really spent their year like trying to solve all these problems.
And because you both had the chance to try dog sledding just once or twice, obviously mostly leaving it to the students, did that help you just in kind of like tapping into really understanding this program and the things that they were learning throughout it?
Well, I went on a dog sled excursion with Iselin. She was driving, I was her passenger. Um, and it sounds like what I'm just about to describe is a little boring, but I was so relaxed that I almost fell asleep. And there is something, it's very soothing because it is like Hege was saying, it's so quiet. You just hear that you can't talk. You just hear and there's no sound in the forest, and you just hear the dogs. So there is something very rhythmic and, you know, like it's like a spell.
And in the way that the two of you shoot together, I know that often you'll kind of go into the field and start filming together and then almost like take turns to go back and shoot. And with this, it was you'd take turns and one of you would go every 4 to 6 weeks. How does that really allow you to maximize the way that you're able to use production and kind of how much you also feel like you're able to capture in the observational documentary field?
Well, I think that, in this film, we really edited and shot at the same time, more than normal. We were editing very soon after we started shooting, partly because the dailies were being subtitled and we were missing things that were happening. We got the gist, but not the specifics at times. And so we really started a couple months in. And we finally landed with our final editor. So someone was watching the material and it was helping inform the next shoot. So it was especially important for us. We believe in one voice in the field as directors, so we don't go in the field together either because it can confuse cinematographers. We have different approaches to different characters, and so it feels more fresh if someone else is coming back with a treasure trove of material, and then the person who wasn't on location can study it, look at it, and be completely cold to the experience, and just have a real cold eye. And we think that it keeps the A and A minus scenes in the film, as opposed to convincing yourself that just because you were freezing your ass off for 3 days that the material is good. It might just not be good. So we've been doing it this way forever. And in this case, it was especially important because of the overlapping edit. I mean, we got access to the film, to the school in March 2023. The film opened at Sundance January 2025. For us, that's a very short schedule. And it only worked out that way because we were in tandem editing and shooting.
And in terms of the edit, I've heard that one of the things that you kind of looked at was that the students were at times involved in some political rallies and you kept trying to figure out how to work it into the story, but also wanted the film to have a real timeliness to it. Was the idea of it feeling very timeless something that you went into it with, or was that something that you discovered in looking at those scenes during post-production?
That was part of the discovery and sharing it with people. And we do a lot of feedback screenings. We love feedback. Yeah, people didn't want to leave their world. They didn't want to leave the timeless world. They're right on the Russian border, the school. I mean, you can literally see Russia. It's right there. So global politics are right there. So we thought that was a really interesting thing to bring in, which intellectually it is, but emotionally, and if I could use the word spiritually, it didn't make sense. And our audiences were like, I listen to the radio and I read the paper every day. I don't want to be there. I want to be alone in the woods with the dog and the kids. So our audience didn't like it and didn't want it. So we make our films for our audiences, not for
and also
ourselves and for our moms.
it became a story about growing up, not growing up in 2024. And so instead of integrating those scenes, which was painful personally for me because I loved those scenes, but we got such rejection. And so we replaced that concept with the mythical through line of the film, using the red thread, using the tree and the myth, because that is universal and that is timeless. So we sort of swapped one concept for one that the film was asking for.
And
It's true. It's interesting. We look backwards instead of down in our belly buttons.
Plus, it's like we don't know how to react to what's happening right now, and either do the students. Everything's just a reaction. We're living in a time where we are reacting in real time, and probably we don't understand what it all means. We just don't. And so, to have a film that you're leaving to the world, one of your in your body of work that is so like hinged on like what happened in the Ukraine. It maybe wouldn't have legs in 10, 15 years, and we want our films to have legs and a tail, and I guess that's a dog. But for a long period of time, and that was threatening it. That was threatening it.
Yeah, and there's a moment in the film where one of the students is on a phone call with one of their family members, and they're kind of joking, saying, I was expecting it to be really Arctic, but it's really hot right now. This was a scam, joking around. And I was curious for both of you in with the idea of going in and making this film, what were some of the ways in which the experience completely circumvented or was different to the expectations that you initially had of what it would be like?
I did not know because there was no way I could know um, what kind of effect being in such a quiet place would do to me personally. Because, we live in New York City. I've lived in cities my entire life. I'm from Washington, D.C. I went from D.C. to New York. I'm a city girl. And I had never been exposed to complete and utter silence. And that was very profound. And that tapped into something that I didn't know existed. So the place really was the big surprise. I didn't know how much it would impact me.
And you're both talking about how early on in this film, you really saw that there was the possibility to follow a journey where your subjects would go through a lot of change. And we see so much of that throughout the course of this, to see one of them at the beginning saying, I really struggle to make friends and I'm worried about continuing to be lonely here. And then seeing him forge these real friendships and how emotional it feels to him when they graduate at the end of the program was so beautiful to see. And I was interested in kind of how the change that you saw in these three students, kind of if it was similar to the idea of what you thought it might be at the beginning, or if again they just really surprised you in a lot of ways.
I mean, we were so surprised when the two young men became friends while we were shooting. In fact, on camera, that was like the first time. I mean, it was delightful. I would never have imagined, I couldn't have imagined that happening. I mean, in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. But I was so elated to see a connection between two rather lonely people. It really was genuine. They've gone on a trip together since. They've seen each other. They made a friendship, which, as we know, especially with boys and young men right now, is considered a crisis connection. And so, something that maybe seemed so simple for us growing up seems like a Herculean task for a lot of young people. And to watch them overcome that with such joy and humor, it was like extremely life affirming. And we felt like we'd made a friend, So it was a surprise, it was a surprise. And it was a surprise how quickly Hege took to the program. Like she was like, I'm a city girl. And she was all 11 makeup brushes and like discos. And like, I don't know. She was like, I'm not going to go to this. She was almost not going to go. And for her to quickly like hold an axe in her hand and like be making, I was like, what is happening? So it was all a surprise to me personally. Yeah.
And partway through the story on screen, one of the students, Ramon, leaves the program and doesn't come back after break, but he does end up returning to the program and realizing when he's away, actually, I really missed it here. In the period of time where he wasn't there for filming, did you have any conversations about ideas or pivoting, or what did that change for you in the moment, if anything?
You had to
Well,
just give in.
this is the risk of making observational films, which is you can't control it. It's the thing that makes it really magical and special when it works. But I think if it had happened to us 20 years ago, we would have been in full-blown panic. But now we understand that you just have to surrender and pivot and figure it out, because it's people's real lives and they're changing from day to day and you don't know what's going to happen. We were so thrilled when he came back. not just for our film, which obviously it was, it impacted our film, but also that this person decided to finish something when it it's hard for him. Like the first thing he told us when we first talked to him was that he had dropped out of high school. So we just wanted him to complete this program because he needed that win. So when he came back, we were so excited for him, and then also excited that it was going to change the shape of the film.
Yeah.
We made a film a couple of years ago about a con artist, and we were following him, and then we lost him for months. And we definitely didn't tell Showtime when that happened. We did not tell our finances on this movie when Roman left either. We're like, let's just see what happens here. You know what I mean? It's because it's other people that can bring the stress. But we would have solved it, like we've gotten good at stuff that happens in real life. You know what I mean? So it worked out.
I know it feels par for the course in documentary filmmaking to a degree, I imagine, at this point for you both.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed the film. I always love your work, and this was no exception. So thank you so much to both of you for talking about it. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks for the nice conversation.